Welcome to the Habits to Goals podcast with Martin Grunburg. It's time to take control of your life. Are you ready to achieve goals faster and more consistently than ever before? You need the habit factor. You're listening to Habits to Goals, the podcast that helps you create the habits that lead to success. I'm your host, Nick Polkuski, and here is Martin Grunburg. Martin, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the podcast.
Nicky P, it is terrific to be here. How you doing today, bud?
I am doing outstanding. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, but you sound terrific.
Well, thank you.
You sound high energy. You sound like things are going great.
Oh yeah, they definitely are. So Martin, what is your GTR for this week?
The GTR this week, I'm going to hit you with 3, which I should never do, except for the third one. It's going to make sense because it's actually a little bit bittersweet. We'll work our way through that. So first, Alaska. I think I mentioned before, well, it was a couple weeks ago, but before I took off, how I was going to Alaska. Is that ringing a bell?
Well, I know you told me, but I can't remember if we mentioned it on the podcast or not. So,
okay, well, holy smokes. That was unbelievable. Have you been to Alaska?
I have not, no. It's one of the places I've wanted to go to for a little while.
You and me both. Yeah, you and me both, buddy. I had, it's still a bit surreal that I've already been and I'm back and I'm just trying to process it. And the fact is, we were walking on glaciers, man. It was just, and not just one, multiple. It was, the only word, because I'm kind of speechless, is scale. Like the magnitude of everything in Alaska. It's like just multiply it by 100. Mm-hmm. It's obviously the biggest state by a long shot, but it is just, I mean, when we were in Washington, I was blown away how many trees there were, like how much forestry, right? And then it's just, like I said, multiply it times 100. It's just unreal. And then these glaciers, we saw chunks of ice falling off the sides of the room I'm in, which probably doesn't tell you a whole lot, but it was unreal. So that was an awesome GTR. I'll sneak in a second one, and then I'll let you go, and then I'll bust out my third. So the second one is, I've mentioned there's this great guy in Florida. He's, I believe, a general manager of a manufacturing plant. He used the app, I think, early in the year and lost some weight, had some success with it. I think I've shared this story, but the gist is a consultancy came in to help the plant with safety habits or behaviors. Oh, nice. And yeah, the funny thing, Nick, is they left them with a piece of paper. And so this guy having success with the habit factor, John, reached out to me, shared the story. Anyways, we've talked a bit with the consultancy, but the long and the short of it is, the second GTR is, today I get an email. We planned a discount for the company, so they bought 30 plus versions of, the Habit Factor Pro, and so they're going to use it on the shop floor to report to the management team. And John's even given me some great ideas for some integrating new features and maybe working it into the portal. So it's not only a GTR, it's another shout out to John, a thank you. I know there's been consultancies using it and recommending the app in all sorts of capacities, but this is one of the first times something like this has happened where I'm kind of working semi-closely with them. So there you go. There's 2 good GTRs. What do you got going?
Oh, that's awesome. That's a really cool one. Well, for me, my GTR is I am finally really getting things set up here in my office, and I have in my office. So I basically have a bedroom that converted into an office here. It's a recording studio for the podcast. But then I'm really excited because I set up a little video recording studio. And so I've been cranking out some videos, one for the course, but then also for my podcast and for a couple other projects here coming down the future. So it's been really fun. So I'm super excited about that, and I'm actually gonna throw out a second one here too, just because I gotta
right.
I have you did, so you have three, so I figure I can have at least two.
No,
right?
I got it. I like it. Hey, look, I love it.
So really, my second one is that tomorrow night we're having a little get together with a bunch of people, we met from various spots, just kind of. That we're going to have a monthly gathering together, really. We're basically focused around getting a bunch of unique, really awesome people together and just getting to meet one another. So I'm excited for that.
Everybody's keeping their clothes on, right?
Yes.
Just kidding. All right. Well, I love it, man. That's a good one. And going back to my second one, it does sound a lot like teamwork, which is something we recently talked about. In other words, we were talking about the value of team and working with people, and yeah, there's some nice teamwork there. So the third one is a bit of a heartbreaker. It's a bit bittersweet, but I'm going to lay this on the audience and you simultaneously. I want to thank you again. You have been and are just a true pro. You've just been phenomenal, and I've been honored to work with you. I believe I told you when we started this little experiment, the podcast, my number one goal, objective, was when people would search the habit factor, there was another touch point. So first it was the app, then there's a book. Now there's a podcast. If you want to count the audiobook, there's 4. So it gives kind of the newbie is looking around habits and goals, and lo and behold, there's more resources that have been provided by this podcast. So the reason it's bittersweet is in an effort mostly to knock out this next book, The Pressure Paradox, we have decided, and it's really another example of me practicing, hopefully, what I preach on occasion, and that is I got to consolidate my resources and be more efficient and effective. And so as fun and as rewarding as our effort has been with the Habits to Goals podcast, I'm putting it on the shelf. I think I don't know if it's 3 months, 6 months. I doubt it's a year, but I'm just shelving it. I do want to revisit it. Again, my goal was to get maybe 12 episodes, and I think you probably know better than me, but I think we're upwards of 30 at this point.
This is episode number 35.
Holy shish kebab.
So
that's
a great first season, right?
Yeah. And you know what? I appreciate you saying that because and not crying. I was concerned about the decision. Then I started looking around at some of the most popular podcasts, and I see significant gaps in some of them. Not that one way is right or wrong, but seriously, some of the top performing podcasts have a year-long gap. So it'll also be a good test, I think, to maybe see the resiliency of the show or the popularity. I think certainly anybody who's finding value, a way to maybe help expedite its return might be to share some reviews, and we'll talk about that later. But anyways, that's my third. It's tough to call it a GTR because I love the show, but I know what's coming out, and it's the Pressure Paradox, and we'll talk about that at the end. So I've taken too long on the GTRs, but I want to kick off the topic. Do you know what it is?
I do, just simply because you let me know a little while ago.
Okay.
But we're going to be talking all about persistence today.
Correct. And the title is Persistence is More Valuable Than dot, dot, dot.
Ooh, leaves a little
So what
suspense
is,
in the air.
right, I love it. So what is persistence more valuable than Nick? Give me,
Then not being persistent.
that's great. I love it. Brilliant. Absolutely. Can't go wrong with that. Um, yeah. So let's start with that. I will say it's more valuable than planning.
Mm.
I will say it's more valuable than IQ. And by the way, I'll just probably back this up with a couple quotes. I will say it's more valuable than knowledge.
Yeah.
I will say it's more valuable than talent. So there's a few. And let me hit you with a couple quotes. Ambition is the path to success. Persistence is the vehicle you arrive in. Have you heard that?
I've never heard that, but I like it. I think that's very, very true.
I should fish around in my app because I know that quote's in there, and I'm sure there's probably close to a dozen other. But yeah, I love that. Ambition is the path to success. Persistence is the vehicle you arrive in. The other is energy, which I love, and persistence conquer all things. That's Benjamin Franklin. Energy and persistence conquer all things. I love it. So what did I say it's more valuable than? Did you get any of those?
I lots of things.
Okay.
Basically, you said, yeah, and ultimately what it is that persistence is kind of that driving vehicle. Like I think that's a great quote. It's what allows you to move forward. And I know I've seen this in my life and in several other examples. It's not necessarily that the people who are the smartest or who are even the most talented win. It's the people who stick around the longest.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? So the person who has that quote, Calvin Coolidge, it's a phenomenal quote. It's nothing in the world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. So that's not, I mean, you could end the show right there. We're not going to do that, but yeah, phenomenal, isn't it? And why is it that, for instance, talent is not as important? Any examples?
I mean, yeah, ultimately, it just does come down to, it's really more about showing up. A lot of times people with talent, sometimes they don't think they have to work as hard, so they are able to be surpassed by that person who shows up and practices every day. That person who shoots the 1,000 free throws every single morning rather than just sleeping in. Ultimately, that is what makes the difference. So I guess the big question is, how do you start to develop some of this persistence? How can you work on your persistence muscle, if you will?
Can you table that? And
yeah, absolutely.
Promise me we'll get back to that?
Okay, sounds good.
First of all, that was brilliant. And absolutely, yeah, this idea of showing up, I think that's something I love to share when I'm coaching. It's that talent just gets you so far. And at a certain point, oh, and by the way, how perfect is this example? Unplanned, but in the last episode, we talked about the GTR and the Women's World Cup.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to love this. The star of the game, the one who had the hat trick, Carly Lloyd,
yeah,
she was cut from the 21 and under national team.
Mm.
And so we all look at her and we think, oh my God, amazing. What a effortless existence in life. She's just a star. She's super talented. Or maybe she was super persistent.
Yeah.
Right? And that's exactly what happened. She had talent, but it took getting cut. And then she had to, first of all, she had to make a decision. Is this something I want to do? Can I get better? Do I believe I can get better? She sought out a coach who, she said, give it to me straight. And he said, you're not mentally tough enough and you're not playing both sides of the ball. So I don't know. I think it's a perfect example of persistence. And I promise we'll get back to that. I want to just see if we can find maybe a few examples of some of these. I mean, what about genius? Like, how many super smart people are there that aren't as quote unquote successful as the dude who, was held back 3 times in 5th grade, right?
Oh, right. Mm-hmm.
So what's the difference there? Again, it's probably persistence. And so that covers education as well. Really, I want to, I was just saying, we're just about to go there, and I want to hit one more thing. You remember Michelangelo's quote about patience? And what did he call eternal patience?
No, I don't.
Okay. It's okay if you don't. Oh man, it is, and I'm just, when I say oh man, I'm just feeling sorry for you because I'm always putting you on the spot. But it was genius is eternal patience. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I thought, wow. Well, wait a minute. Can we not say the same about persistence? In other words, if you look at the guys who really grind, like an Edison through 10,000 failures, was it patience that made him a genius, or was it persistence? I'm not saying one or the other is right. I like the thought of persistence is eternal, or genius is eternal persistence. I like it almost as much as patience, if not more. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's more correct, to be honest, just simply because patience just seems like it would eventually happen no matter what. It would just kind of show up, whereas persistence, you actually have to, continue working, continue to try and find the solution. So I think persistence is more active.
I think it may be more accurate. I do understand where, I shouldn't say I understand. I think I understand where Michelangelo was going, and that is when you do something, you carve David or you paint the Sistine Chapel, it takes years. So people marvel and go, oh my God, that's genius. And his statement is, well, genius is patience, right? Mm-hmm. It took a long freaking time. Yes. So, all right, so we covered a few of that. Now your question, it's a great one. How are you going to develop the persistence muscle or habit? So the question, I'll just put it right back to you. You tell me.
Yeah, I think it's really the best way to go about it is to find something and start in small chunks and find ways to slowly just develop that habit, develop that discipline of not quitting when it gets a little difficult.
That's right. What is the easiest thing to do?
Just stop doing whatever you're doing.
That's right, to quit. Yeah. Correct. Yeah, the easiest thing to do almost always is quit. And there are rare exceptions where quitting is the right thing to do, but that is after being excruciatingly persistent and patient. But what happens seemingly more often than not is people will, at the first sign of a hurdle or an obstacle, they will quit. And as you were alluding to, I think that's one of the key distinguishing traits or factors is this it's not IQ, it's not knowledge, it's not talent, it's this ability to persist. So there are 3 Well, actually, before I go there, let's finish the thought. So persistence, I think you're right. It's a habit. So is discipline. And you develop that just like the habit of brushing your teeth or flossing. You can do it haphazard, or you can follow a process that we've put together and we've talked about, and you can find it on a past episode. It's called the PAR methodology. But you plan, you act, you record, which is tracking plus notes, and then you reassess. So you dig in, you go after it, and you track, and you keep going. So what I was going to say is there are kind of three. So Coolidge said persistence and determination alone, right, are omnipotent, right?
Right.
But I think there's, if we're trying to be more accurate, perhaps, there may be one more piece rather. I mean, you can always keep adding stuff, but you don't want to make it too convoluted. But it's this idea of adaptability or resilience. So if you just, and I've seen this and probably experienced it firsthand, if you just persist without adjusting, right, or adapting, then you're probably running into a brick wall. So I'm going to jump to another quote. What did Darwin say? You remember Darwin, the theory of evolution, that guy?
Yes, I do.
So what was his great quote? Do you happen to recall it? There are many, but there's one I'm leaning towards.
Probably not. No, I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
that's a hard lead in. I'm sorry. So he said something along the lines, it's not the blank, it's not the of species, nor the blank of species that survives. So what are those two blanks? It's not the blank.
Is it the smartest or the strongest?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, it's not the smartest and it's not the strongest, but it's the most adaptable that survives. So you can be strong and still die. You can be smart and still die. But as long as you're adapting, and by the way, this translates straight into the work environment, the business environment, entrepreneurship, I don't care, relationships, the inability to adapt. And by the way, how many people do we know that it's my way or the highway or
Right.
and I know them well because that used to certainly be me. It was this idea that I have the answers, I'm not adjusting, you guys figure it out, right?
Yeah, well, and that just simply doesn't work, especially nowadays where things seem to are just picking up speed. All the changes are just happening quicker and quicker, it seems. And so you have to be willing to adapt and to, ultimately persist.
That's great. And so that's why I'm saying I love what Coolidge says, persistence and determination. And I think you can add resilience or adaptability. So this idea that you take action, you look at the results, you adapt, you take action, you look at the results. And by the way, here's how it really goes. You take action, you fail.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is translated, look at the results. You take action, you fail, you look at the results, right? You take action, you fail, and you just keep refining. But I can tell you, this one business group I'm in, there are at least two guys that are hyper iterative. So these guys they just go into it, particularly as it relates to sales. So they got a script, they hit it, it fails, they tweak something, and they do it as quickly as possible. And so this one guy is talking about, and he's not bragging, it's just straight up, because I've seen it over the course of 18 months to 2 years. His close rate is now 65%. They have a great business. They're growing exponentially, and it has been this process of persistence, determination, and adaptability or resilience. So it's just been beautiful to watch. He's absolutely killing it. Run rate probably close to $2 million in less than 2 years, and it's been fun to watch. So, anywho, I think that is the essence and the power of persistence, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
then to bring it all home, we talked about Carly Lloyd, cut from her team, and here she is, the star. And of course, that ties back to teamwork. So we got it all covered these days. Anything else you have before we talk about a few kind of closing comments?
No, I just think this is ultimately the key. You can survive so many things if you're just willing to kind of push through it and adapt and, be willing to make those changes. So I think keeping persistence in mind is going to be so important as people move forward.
Right. I mean, you don't want to, it's like, how do you say, I don't want you to expect failure, but don't be surprised by it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And don't be deterred by it, right? Don't be surprised nor deterred. So one of the final quotes I'll hit you with is, if not the final, is Zig Ziglar, right? The great motivational speaker used to say that positive thinking won't help you do everything. It just helps you do everything better. And that's the kind of mindset I think you just need to have, whether you're an entrepreneur, you're starting a business, you're just whatever it is, kind of life is that grind where you need that growth mindset. So how's that sound, bud?
Sounds phenomenal. Sounds perfect.
Sounds phenomenal. Sweet. So we're coming to a bit of a close here. I got to figure out how to button this up as we head into this hiatus. I wanted to, I guess, make a couple requests or tie that into a thank you, listener. It's been epic. There are probably 3 quotes that kind of stand out. I think it was one review. This guy says, actually, it might have been an email, but I listen to the show on the way to work. It fires me up. Another email guy said, I'm sharing this podcast with our entire management team. There was a tweet the other day. I shared it with you because I didn't know. The guy was like, where the hell is the show? Why don't I see, a bunch of episodes on Stitcher? So believe it or not, I love to see that. That's great. And hopefully we figured that out. Nick?
Yeah, it should be appearing there now.
So that's kind of my close. My close is a huge thank you. Again, I'm doing this to focus and practice what I preach. I'm going to be coming out with the pressure paradox. What I want to do is, if you're on my emailing list, well, there's one of them at least. If you go to either the podcast.habitfactor.com, that'll loop you in. You can even do it via your cell phone. You can text to it to get quickly on the list. The other way is the template link off the habitfactor.com, which I think we hang off every show. But the beauty is, if you get on that list, what I'm getting at is something I didn't do with the Habit Factor. I've seen other authors have success with this. I know if you're into it, people certainly enjoy it, and that is, I don't have to, I'd like to, I'm considering putting together some sort of launch group. So I don't know if that's an application, but I probably want, 10 to 20 people, or maybe keep it down to 6 people. I have to figure it out. But as we come to a close, what I'm getting at is, if we'd like to stay in touch, or if that appeals to you in some way, obviously I'll identify a few perks, whether it's an early draft of the book, a signed copy. We'll figure out some stuff. But the way to do that, because I'll push that out to the email list, is just to get on the email list, or you can always just shoot me an email, and we'll go from there. But that's kind of the next big push is the launch of the Pressure Paradox here in a couple months. So there you go, bud. It's been an amazing experience, and I hope to circle back soon-ish. You have anything to say?
Oh, I've just really enjoyed this. This has been outstanding, and I'm really excited that we were able to do this. And I think we gave a lot of great information to all those listeners out there. So thank you, Martin, and I'm excited to hear more about the pressure paradox when that comes up.
That's cool, Nick. You have been great, and I have a feeling we'll be talking again soonish.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you, listener. Reach out, and we will talk soon. Cheers, buddy.
And thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Habits to Goals podcast. I'm so excited that you could be here with us as we explore the habit factor and how habits can actually change your life. We'd love to hear what your big takeaways were from this episode. Simply go to thehabitfactor.com/podcast. And you can find all the episodes, all the previous episodes, and the show notes there, as well as all the resources that were mentioned in this episode of the podcast. I also really want to encourage you to go subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or Stitcher or SoundCloud or whatever podcast player you listen to, because we are delivering a brand new episode to you each and every single Monday, and I don't want you to miss a single one. So simply go to thehabitfactor.com/iTunes and leave and subscribe there. We'd also really encourage you, if you enjoy these episodes, the best way to show your appreciation is to simply go leave a review on iTunes, because that helps so many other people find the podcast and realize if this is the podcast for them that could really have an impact in their life, their business, and in just their happiness and wellness. So thank you for tuning into this episode. Remember to go out there and create habits that lead to your success.